I hope you all had a lovely evening. You enjoyed your trip to the brewery, and you enjoyed the last-minute goal. What a move. That was absolutely amazing, but there we go. So, after the excitement of last night, we are now in a truly exciting morning where Irene is going to start and she's going to talk about root regression in linearly homomorphic encryption. So, over to you.
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you to everyone that is here at 9 a.m. after the brewery visit. So today I'm going to present you a privacy preserving system that can be used to train a regression model, that is a particular machine learning model. And this is, my current affiliation is ISI, but this is a work I did while I was a postdoc at UW-Madison, and it's a joint work with Soumya Shah, David Page Kang-Yu from UW-Madison, and Mark Joyce. So let me start with some motivation. Machine learning is this set of tools, of mathematical tools that we can use to analyze data and extrapolate from data model partners that are very useful to understand the data and also to make prediction from the data for the future. And it finds application in many fields, in many real-world settings. Can be used for recommendation system for commercial products. Can be used for anti-spam software. And in some of these fields, for example, medicine and bioinformatics, it can be used for disease prevention. So I can study a model that predicts for a patient how likely is to get a specific disease, or for drug dosing, okay? So depending on the health records and genomic information of a single patient, I can predict the best dose for a medicine, for a drug. Another application. So it's clear that in some of these applications, especially the one I mentioned for last, we have this conflict between privacy and information sharing. Privacy because in this application the data encode very sensitive information, okay? Okay? Like health, for example, health records. Or sometimes the model can be proprietary models. So if you have a very good anti-spam and you want to sell it, you don't want to just give it for free, okay? So there are some privacy proprietary issues. On the other side, it's very, it's well known that information sharing is very important for machine learning, okay? The data that you learn from, they have been collected including some diverse font, many fonts of collection, and you want to have a large usability of your model, so you want to share the result, okay? So you can't just keep the things hidden and secret. So these clearly are two features, two aims that are in conflict, and privacy-preserving machine learning just look at this. So researchers from the crypto and the machine learning community started to look at how to solve for practical problem this conflict. For example, to give you a bit more specific what this conflict means, during the training phase of a machine learning model, so when you, from the training data that are being collected, you try to extrapolate a model using some known learning algorithm, we all know, and it's very well known in the machine learning community, that the efficiency of the efficacy of this process, so how good is the outcome, the model, really depends on how good is the training data. And with good usually means that it has to be large, so many data, and they have to be very diverse data, okay? So a simple way, a usual way to get this training data with these features is to just merge together, data that are collected from different sources. So what I call here the private data silos, okay? So in the medical setting, for example, imagine that you don't want to train your model for disease prediction on the data collected by one hospital, but you want to train it on data collected from many hospitals that are across all your country. So now the specific goal is that we want to train a model on the collection of this data while keeping all these data silos, okay, these data sets, while keeping each data set private, secret, okay? And this is, if you are familiar with MPC, this is just a particular instantiation of the general MPC problem. Multi-party computation, you have a public function and private inputs held by different parties, and you want to run the function on the inputs without revealing any information beside what is leaked from the output. So this is just a particular instantiation. You could in principle use general MPC tools, but what you want to go here, you want to look at the training algorithm, the specific algorithm, and do something more ad hoc to gain in efficiency. Okay? So a bit of history. Not too much actually. Privacy preserving training was, to the best of my knowledge, first looked at in 2000, at Crypto 2000. It was a paper by Lindan and Pincus. They did this nice algorithm for two parties where they tried to train a decision tree, and they used this specific machine learning algorithm, the ID tree. And after that, for a while the community was silent, and in the last years there were a lot of works all about how do you train a machine learning model on a different data set, private data set, and all the works are in different model, different for the security and different for the machine learning. So they look at different machine learning training algorithms. And for example, ridge regression was considered in this list of work. Our work follows these lines because it's about how you train a ridge regression model, and we use only linear homomorphic encryption, and it's in the two-server model, the cryptographic two-server model. So let me, before going to the detail of the system, let me explain or recall what ridge regression is. So in ridge regression you have the data points are of this form, okay? You have an X and a Y. X is what we call the feature, the explanatory features, okay? And Y is the output. So the idea is that you want to explain Y as a relation, as a function of the X, of the vector X. And we assume that the relation, the function is actually linear. So what we want to do, we want to just write Y as a linear combination of the component of the vector X, okay? So this W, the coefficient of the linear combination, they are called weights, and they are the model. So the collection of the weights, the vector W, is the model. And like if D is 1, you can actually, it's just a line, the W gives, it's a coefficient, gives you a line in the plane, okay? This model is simple, but it's also very important and finds a lot of application. For example, it's used for dosing this drug, warfarin. So this is a drug that you can use for heart problems. So if you have an heart attack and you want to prevent, you survive it, likely, and you want to prevent the second one, this is the drug you should take, at least in US. And the dosing is very complicated. Physicians have a lot of problems because it's really depend on the specific health feature of the patients and genetic also. So they have to consider genotypes for the patient and other health records. And they found, so this is like a reference you can check online, and they found, they did a study on, I think it was around 10,000 patients, and they find the perfect ways for all these features to find a good dosing. So how do you learn, how do you train a ridge regression model? That is also quite simple. basically what you want to do, you have this training set. So you have a collection of this vector, this pair xi, yi. And what you do, you just want to minimize, you find the w that minimize the difference between the given real outcome and what you will predict using that w, right? So this is called the mean squared error. You want to minimize that plus this lambda norm of norm 2 squared of w, and you have this factor just to avoid overfitting your data, so avoid to just look too much to your training data, where lambda is just a parameter. So this is a differentiable function, so if you want to minimize it, you just compute the gradient and put it equal to 0 and you find the solution. And this is equivalent to do this. So you compute this matrix and this vector that are just depends only on the training data. So you can see the formulas, it's just the sum, and it's the number of training data. And for each data point you take the x and do xi transpose x. This gives you a matrix, okay? Same for b, you just multiply the yi, the coefficient, the outcome coefficient by the vector, and you sum for all the data points, and this gives you b. And then, when you have these two, you just solve this linear system, and this gives you the minimum point and the answer, the model. So now the challenge is doing this when this data set is made by, it's the merge of the local data silos, and you can't collect all this data silos in one point because you want to keep the data silos secret. So the way you do this, you encrypt, right? The way we keep things secret very often is just encrypting. And what we use in our system is actually a linearly homomorphic encryption scheme. So it's usual public key encryption, semantic security, usual definition. And I also ask that I have a way to compute from the encryption of two messages, the encryption of the sum. So there is the plus in the box operation. And then there is also this property that given an encryption of a message and a public value M1, I can compute the encryption of M1 and 2. And this is kind of a quite simple homomorphism. For example, Palier if you has this property. And as I told you before, our system is in the two-server model. That means that we assume that to help doing this training on private data set of the merge of thread data set, we have two servers. I call one crypto provider and one the machine learning server that are not colluding. So we don't trust them to handle the data in the clear, but we trust them to follow the protocols and not to collude among them. They can be, for example, implemented by just two of the data owners, but for simplicity we keep them, we give them names. So this is all the parties now that we have. We have the T data owners, each of one with a data set, D1, D2, DT, okay? And then we have the two servers that are going to help for the computation. And so the first thing that we do, and is actually the crypto provider doing it, we generate a valid pair, a secret key, public key for our encryption scheme. And then we send, the crypto provider keeps the secret key secret, store it there, and the public gives to everyone in the system the public key. And then we have the first phase of our system that basically the data owners just encrypt somehow their data set and send this encryption, this information encrypted to the machine learning server that basically works as a collector, collects all the data sets but in an encrypted form. So now basically the machine learning server can compute using the homomorphic property, because we are using a linear homomorphic system. It can compute this encryption of the matrix A and B. If you remember from the previous slides, this is what we need. These are the coefficients of the system that we need to solve to compute the model. And in the second phase of our system, this is actually what these two servers do. They interact between them to compute the solution of that system without clearly decrypting A and B, because we want to keep A and B secret. They can leak information about the data sets. So this is the overview, and let's go a bit more in detail to check, to see what we actually do with these two phases, these two steps. So the first one, let me repeat, we have each user, each data owner with a DI, a set, and we want to compute from this DI, we want to compute A and B, that is the sum of each xi transpose xi, and then yi times xi, okay? So this is the formula. I can assume that I just for simplicity for presentation, I put all the data points in a matrix, okay, in a table, okay, in order like that. And this is now the definition, I'm using this notation, okay? So the way we compute the encryption of A and B from the single encryption depends on how this distribution, so if this is the entire data set, how is distributed among the users. So the first simple case is that we just assume that each data owner have a rows, okay? So it's kind of the simple, like think about, again, hospital in the medical setting, so each hospital has few patients, and so meaning that he has the entire row here, okay? So this is simple because then the owner of this row can just compute this, for example, this product, and encrypt the product, send it to the machine learning server that is going to do the homomorphic operation, the plus in the box, to compute the sum, that is then give you clearly the matrix, okay? So this is the simple efficient case. The more complicated and general case is when this data set is for some reason split arbitrarily among all the users, among all the data owners. So one data owner has, for example, the features of the first row but the output of the second one, okay? So this is just to generalize this. And we were able to solve this just using linear homomorphic encryption, even if in this case you have to do a multiplication, right? Because one player can encrypt this value, one player can encrypt the other, but then or like this one and this one, but then you have to do the multiplication to do this operation, right? You have to do this multiplication between ciphers. I mean, the machine learning server has to do it, not you personally. So we were able to solve this. I'm not going to give you the details, but basically we adapted a trick that was presented by Barbosa and others at ESOIC last year that was called leveled homomorphic encryption, that allows exactly this, to do one multiplication from linearly homomorphic encryption. And this is the first phase. Then what you have is that you have the machine learning server with the encryption of the matrix A and the vector B. The crypto provider knows the secret key, and you want to solve the system A times WB. So you want to find the W that solves this linear relation. We do this using an interactive protocol that is based on the I mask before sending to the guy that has the secret key. So basically the machine learning server sample a random matrix R and a random vector capital R, small r, and computes this encryption. So from encryption of A times R, and from encryption of B, encryption B plus AR, okay? These are random values now inside the encryption, basically. And these are sent to the crypto provider that has the secret key, can decrypt, so you can see this random matrix A tilde, B tilde, and can solve the system associated to this random matrix. This clearly doesn't reveal any information because R is random. Both are, the small and the big one, are random, okay? But the nice thing is that if this W tilde is sent back to the machine learning server, since he knows the random matrix, he somehow knows the key of the randomization, the source of the randomness, he can basically bring back, he can correct this wrong solution, right? W tilde, you can correct it and compute the real solution. So you can check, and this, if you do this gives you exactly a solution for this initial system. Okay, and this is all. So this is the system with some skipped details. And what about efficiency? So communication for the first phase, so for the second phase, when you solve the linear system, it doesn't depend on the setting of the partitioning of the data sets, and it's always proportional to d cube. D is the future, so many future, and n is the number of data points in the merge of all data sets, and this is the proportion to d cube log n d. While for phase one, the merging phase, let's call it, you have, that depends on which of the two sets. Since we have two different protocols, it depends on the two sets. And you will expect something quadratic. It's you have this d cube and this log n because of, I skipped some details, and the system is on the integers. You have to do the encryption and the masking. You have to embed it in Zn. And you want them to, you compute the solution Zn, and you want to be able to bring it back to the integers, right? And in order to do this, you have to do some techniques, for example, rational reconstruction, that force you to work with a very large n, like if you are in Zn, okay, in a very large group. These are just some comparison with the previous work. So the previous work, these two basically have similar techniques. This one has a very similar techniques for the phase one. The gas monad, they use secret sharing for phase one, and then phase two, the solving the linear system is done using YAO. So respect to this, we save a lot in communication because we don't have to send the garbage circuit. And then there is also a more recent work, the secure ML, that it's a bit different. So asymptotic complexity depends. This is a two-party protocol. They have to do pre-processing because it's basic, it's information taken in the line phase. They do the pre-processing. If you do pre-processing with linear homomorphic encryption, this is the asymptotic communication complexity. So let's say that for not too high dimensional data, for low dimensional data set, we are more efficient asymptotically. And we also test the running time for our system using this UC dataset. UC is a repository that is used for machine learning researchers to test the system, the algorithm. And you see, even for a medium-sized dataset of 37,000 points, 14 features each point, the system the entire system ran in a few seconds. And this implementation, you can read more details in the paper. This table is just in the paper. It's based on Palier schemes with the 1000-bit security. So just let me conclude. I think, yes, I'm over. Yes, I have time to give you some open problems. So this is what I presented today. It's a new system for training region regression on the merge of encrypted dataset, any number of encrypted datasets. And it's designed in this two-server model and works using only linear homomorphic encryption. So something that is maybe interesting to look at, is there a way to somehow improve efficiency just using something different to map from Z to Zn, a different masking system, maybe a masking trick, maybe a different just map from the integers to the group Z over N. This will improve the efficiency, both running time and especially communication. Then something very interesting extension to non-differential regularization term. You remember how you train a regression model, you have like the mean squared error and then the regularization term. So what if that is not norm 2, is norm 1, that is not differentiable, something else? So in machine learning they use a lot these different regularization terms, and our system doesn't understand trivially because they are not, that regularization term is not differentiable. And then looking at active security, I assume the two servers just follow the protocol. So what happens if they don't? Can we assure some security also in that case? And that's all.
Any questions or comments?
So when you compute A times R, right, You're computing it basically over the integers.
No. No, that is done inside the encryption, right?
Yes, but
so
when he decrypts it, right?
It is then. You work here, let's say that's Palier, right?
No, you don't understand what I'm saying. When it decrypts it, the result is A times R computed over the integers because of your encoding, right?
Except because you are encoded, it is in the message plain text. When you decode, you go back from.
But what I'm saying is I don't think this is secure because it will leak. Yeah? So if I repeat with many R's, because I really get the result over the integers. A times
so
R
you say after the decrypt, after the last step?
Yes, that one. When he gets A tilde, this is really A times R over the integers.
No. You decrypt, so it's A times R over Zn. It's like modulo n. I mean, I should have brought maybe modulo n, but I don't want to do it because I didn't introduce the plain test. I mean, I was very, very informal on the encryption scheme, right? But when you do encryption there, A times R, I mean, you are using the homomorphic property of the encryption, so you work with in the plain text space, right?
Yes, but you said afterwards, you said I need to encode my input data using some encoding scheme, which I guess cannot wrap around, so everything has to be over the integers, right?
Otherwise, when you go back, you're not going to have something that works with the...
No, that's why you don't work with us. So you have your A that has integers entries, right?
Yeah.
You take a modulus that is big enough.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can look at the entries in Zn, right? Yeah. I mean, this matrix now just embed in Zn. The entries now.
And
right?
but R's a random matrix over Zn?
Yes.
Totally random over Zn, no encoding?
No, you sample at random in Zn. You do the operation using the homomorphic encryption, so this is random in Zn. Right? You decrypt, you stay in Zn. You compute the solution W tilde in Zn with the modular operation.
But then you're encoding, I mean, did you implement this? Because it seems that you're encoding and the mod n will interfere.
Yeah.
So, anyway, maybe I'll look at
it. No, we'll take it offline, but yeah. It's a cool trick, but I'm not quite sure. Yeah.
So it seems to me that if you just keep one line or one row of the matrix A and you replace all other by the encryption of something you know, by doing this, you learn exactly this row which is left. So you can decrypt, you can use the crypto provider as a decryption wrapper.
So what are you doing? I think this is passive security first of all. So I'm assuming that everyone does the things that I say they have to do. Probably, I mean, if active, so this doesn't stand trivially to active security. And it's with the matrix R or A that you want to do the replacement?
Don't care about R, you just forget about R, you just keep one row of A as it is, and you replace all other by some encryption of things that you have chosen.
So this is if the machine learning server replaces a part of the encryption. Yes, that's one. So actually this is, it's actually very difficult to make it robust for the machine learning server. If it's not exactly. If it's not honest but curious, this is the setting. The result is in this setting. If it's not, you can just use. For example, why you should compute A in the correct way? You can use just the ciphertext received from one data owner, and you can extrapolate a lot of information because it's going to ignore the other. That's it's the extension to robust to have active security, especially against a machine learning server that is corrupt, is not trivial. Yeah, I agree with it.
Any other questions? Okay, let's thank the speaker again. And you're next. Good. Good. Is your slides on there? Yes. Okay, so we're off to the second talk of the morning, and this is also about privacy preserving stuff, because it's in a privacy preserving session, and Quentin's going to give the talk.
Hello, so I am a PhD student with David Poincheval at the École Normale Supérieure in Paris, and Sébastien Canard and Jacques Traoré in Orange Labs in Caen. So we worked on this paper to address a very specific problem which I will present here, and we have found a specific solution using adapted cryptographic techniques to find a very specific and adapted model for this problem. So what we have considered is the case of organ donation. So the problem is that we have some people we need to have grafts of some organ like a kidney, and they have to have a specific kind of organ, so with a right blood type and some other medical conditions like antigens. So for this, we have to have some kind of database with confidential medical data. And we have to find a way to match donors with recipients. So we will have two lists. One list with the medical records of the recipients, the blood types they need, the antigens they need, and so on. And one list with the recipient's medical data with their own blood type and antigens. So the problem is first that we needed to have some donors for all the recipients. So the donors must be willing. We don't have an economic market for organ donation because it's illegal. So the donor is usually someone close, so from the family or a close friend. So this further reduces the pool of potential donors. So there is a partial solution to this problem, which is to do pair matching. This is to say that we will consider two donors who are willing to give each to one recipient, because they are of close friend or from family, but they are not medically compatible to do donation. So to fix this, if they are each compatible to each other, so if the donor A is compatible with the recipient B and the donor B is compatible with the recipient A, then they can each don to the other recipient and everyone is happy. So the problem is very much the same. Instead of matching for one recipient with one donor, instead we just match for one recipient donor pair with one recipient donor pair. So the different kind of matching we must do are kind of complex. So we must check that the blood types are compatible. We must check that the antigen types are compatible. But we can actually cheat a bit to only do equality testing. So for this, I will present an example with blood types. So for blood type compatibility, we have to consider the four basic blood types, so A, and AB. And you can see that a recipient may only give to a donor if it is B, if the donor is O, for instance. So there are some specific cases where they can give the organ and some other where they can't. But the solution to do this without fancy homomorphic computation is simply to brute force by having the recipient create several records, one record for each of the blood type they are compatible with. So a recipient of blood type A will create one record for blood type O and one record for blood type A. If we want to consider the case where we are revealing the number of published records, if we can link them together, would reveal some information about the blood type, we can also publish some random data for non-existent blood type, for instance. So with this approach, we can actually make sure that our matching algorithm for donor-recipient pairs is only done with equality testing. It can also be adapted with HLA, with antigen testing, even if it's a bit more brute force. So in the end, we end up with a few hundred medical records for each donor-recipient pairs. So it's a bit larger, but if our scheme is somewhat efficient afterwards, it's an acceptable trade-off. So, to wrap this problem up, what we want to do is that we want to consider some radical record information and people don't want this medical information to be published freely, so we want to ensure, to guarantee the privacy of those published medical records. But on the other side, we want to be able to collect as many of those medical records as possible. So, and we want to make this efficient. So we need some public database with all the records encrypted in some way which allows us to find some the matches between the pairs, and this must be efficient. So the solution for this is to combine basic homomorphic encryption, so not fully homomorphic encryption, but only additive homomorphic encryption with distributed cryptography. So now that I have presented the motivation, I will go on to how we model the problem from a cryptographic standpoint. Then I will present our solution to the problem on how we've improved our solution to provide actually good privacy guarantees. So first, the model we have used. So first, as I said before, we have a database of medical records of the pairs, and we must have several abilities, so the ability to insert a record, and then the ability to test the equality between two records, to test the matching between donor recipient pairs. And on all of this, we must ensure the privacy. So from a security standpoint, we have a bit of a problem here, because since we are looking for matching pairs, we have, by the problem statement itself, a low entropy. Because if we had high entropy, we will have a very low probability of actually finding matching pairs. So from the actual fact that we can find pairs, we must have low entropy within the inputs. But this means that we can't actually use classical public testing, public encryption with equality testing encryption, because this usually relies on the entropy, the mean entropy of the inputs. Because if the input has low entropy and we can run tests on if we can test for equality between two ciphertexts, then we can and we can encrypt a new ciphertext, then we can trivially brute force and to test all the combinations of the medical records until we find the right one. So to solve this, we have placed the participants for each ability. So we have the fingerprinter, which will be the authority which will allow the generation of new fingerprints. So we must have some way to control the fingerprints. On the other side, we have the tester, who is able to control the testing of the fingerprint. So these two authorities exist in our model, but they can be public in our instantiation. So in our model, we have both fingerprinter and testing authority, but in our instantiation, only the fingerprint is in actual authority, and the testing is actually done publicly, which was linked to our problem statement. And then, of course, we have the users who submit their own medical records to the fingerprinter to record the information in the database. And then they want to be able to test for themselves if there are some recipient donor pair who match in the database. So all of this is associated with setups and key generation. So this is a classical cryptographic method. And then we have two fingerprinting methods. We have started with a symmetric model, but it was actually more interesting to use an asymmetric model. So we have a left and a right fingerprint. So this means that each pair will appear in a left and in a right configuration, so that when we match, we can only match on the left record with the right record. And then finally, we have the ability to test between two fingerprints. And we can see that fingerprinting and testing are both controlled by specific keys. So the left fingerprinting key, the right fingerprinting key, and the testing key. So this is a general model we have used for this. And from this we can define the specific model we will be able to use for this problem. So first, since we want to control the fingerprint, we must have some kind of fingerprint enforgeability which is very similar to that of signature enforgeability, so that we can ensure that no one can generate a fingerprint without going through the fingerprinting process. Then we have similarly the testing enforgeability, so that no one can test without going through the testing process. And finally, the actual confidentiality one, which is the fingerprinting indistinguishability, which controls the fact that fingerprints do not reveal information about the medical records they contain. So now that we have the model, I can present our solution to this. So for this, we go from the fact that a fingerprint is very similar to a signature. So we must have enforgeability, and but additionally to that, we must have indistinguishability. So our model is very similar to the signature, as we can see here. So we have a key generation. The signature is quite similar to the fingerprinting, but we do it asymmetrically. So we have two methods instead of just one, and then the verifying process is very similar to the testing. The main difference is that the validity is done only on one signature, while the testing is done between two fingerprints. And we, as I said, we used asymmetric fingerprints instead of symmetric ones. So our inspiration comes from the Controllable Standard Signature Scheme, which is an interesting scheme because it allows some homomorphic properties. So it's presented here. So beside the setup, we can see that the encryption is the signature is just so we take a message, we hash the message and obtain some hash of the digest H of the message within the first group. And then what we publish is both the I misread, sorry. So H is a random value from J1, sorry. So we pick some random value from J1, and then what we published is the random value itself, and this random value to the power X plus Y times H of the message. X and Y are the private keys of the system. So this is actually our signatures, and when we have both the signature and the message, we can use pairings over G1 and G2, so temporary pairings, to actually test that the signature is correct. So this is done by using X tilde and Y tilde, which are G tilde to the X and G tilde to the Y, which are the previous key.
What are sigma 1, sigma 2?
So this is the first component of sigma and the second component of sigma. So from this, we adapt to the system for our fingerprinting scheme. So as you can see, the setup is a bit similar. We have an additional public key here, which is Y, not Y tag, which is J to the Y, which does not, we have checked, we have proved that it does not compromise the security of the punch button. And it allows us to actually run our protocol. So a fingerprint, either left or right, is very similar to a punchable standard signature, but we do it either in the J1 or J2 group. We can do this by not publishing. We can do this. We'll let you read the paper if you want to check how it's works. And for the testing, we are a bit similar to the signature scheme, but instead of raising the public key, we can directly use the two components of the fingerprints. Again, using the pairings. So with this scheme, we have proved that under some assumptions, we have the interesting properties for fingerprinting. So as I said before, the testing is public. So this is based on a signature scheme, so anyone can do the testing between the two fingerprints. We do not require any particular secret information, only the fingerprints themselves. So we do not consider the security model for testing, only for fingerprinting. So for the enforgeability, this is exactly the same model as the enforgeability of the punchable signature scheme. which is a bit adapted with a different public key, but this is the same assumption and the same model. However, for the indistinguishability, that is the confidentiality of the fingerprints, which are adapted from the signatures, we had to adapt this assumption to a decisional variant so that we could actually run our proof, and we have also proved our assumption in the generic model, in the generic proof model. And we have reduced the indistinguishability of this instantiation of the fingerprint scheme to this new assumption. So this solution, we have actually solved the theoretical problem of fingerprinting, but from a practical standpoint, we still rely on a fingerprinting authority, which is not the best thing in the world. So, to improve this, what we'll do is that we'll consider a few properties we want to improve the system. So first, I'll just recap the scheme here. And what we will consider is the security of the user against the fingerprint. Because until here, the fingerprinter received the message, the clear text, and then generated the fingerprint. So to improve this, we can make sure that the fingerprinter authority does not actually see the message. So this is actually quite easy. We just use an approach very similar to the blind signatures, since we are inspired by the signatures. So we just mask the message by some random value, then the fingerprinter can run the fingerprinting process as usual, but the user can decrypt the message. So what I have not written here are all the zero knowledge proofs which ensure that every participant do their work as they are expected to do. But this is a general idea. So from this, the user actually sends something masked to the fingerprinter, and within the fingerprinting process, no information is leaked. However, when the user publishes their fingerprint, the fingerprinter will be able to see it, and then they could actually just generate many fingerprints by themselves without asking anyone, and just brute force fingerprint by themselves. So to avoid this, the standard technique is simply to split the fingerprinter into several parties. So we can do this obviously using the Shamir secret sharing. So we do this. We can do it here because of the homomorphic property of the partial standard signature scheme. And by splitting the secret key X into several parts, and then the corresponding public key uppercase X, we can have many threshold variants of the fingerprinter. So instead of having one central authority, we will have several parties, so n fingerprinters, and to be able to generate a fingerprint, the user will contact several fingerprinters, and if at least k of the fingerprinters respond and send their part of the fingerprint, the user will be able to reconstitute a fingerprint. So a bit of a catch is that here we are also forced to split a random value within the protocol. So we have to make sure that everything works. I have not put every detail on the slide. But with this, the user actually have some strong guarantee of confidentiality against the fingerprinter. So during the protocol of fingerprinting itself, but even after when they publish the fingerprint, so that no fingerprinter by themselves can actually brute force the fingerprint to reveal its content. So at this stage, we have actually something which is quite interesting already, but we have still one thing to take into consideration is that of verifiability. That is, that even if the fingerprinters cannot leak information from the fingerprint, they could actually sabotage the process. So any fingerprint could actually use some random value instead of their share of the secret key, and then no one will be able to check that this is not a valid fingerprint. The only way to realize the only thing that will happen is that you will not get any matching later on, because you will have a random value and not something from the small message space from the input. So to avoid this, we make sure that the fingerprinter actually runs the fingerprinting process honestly with simply by using zero knowledge proofs. To make it a bit more efficient, we use non-interactive zero knowledge proofs. And with this, we have private verifiability, that is to say that a user can be verified that the fingerprint they get are actually valid. And then from this, we can also give verifiability to not the generator of the fingerprinter, not the signature, but the other users. So for instance, if some user gets fingerprints from the fingerprint, they will submit their confidential fingerprints to some public database. But we may want to make sure that this public database is not spammed with random data or with several re-randomized values of the fingerprints. So to avoid this, we use again zero knowledge proofs. So that we have an adaptation of non-interactive zero knowledge proofs to our protocol, which can be given along with the fingerprint. So they do not reveal any more information, but they ensure that the fingerprints are generated during the fingerprinting process, and that they are actually genuine information. So with this, we've considered a very specific problem where we have the problem statement, which confines us to a low minentropy message space, which is a bit problematic in our use case when we want to have the ability to test the equality between ciphertexts. And we have provided a solution, a practical and reasonably efficient solution, which allows us to generate new fingerprints, so to insert new records into the database, and to look for matching records within the database. So with all this, we have some interesting security properties. They do not rely on the standard model, but the assumptions are not unexpected. So thank you for your attention, and if you have any question, I'll be glad to answer them.
Any questions? Oh.
So if the number of messages is very small and testing is public, so I don't understand how it can be secure against chosen message attacks.
Yeah, of course, this is why this is exactly the problem of controlling the fingerprints, because in a chosen message, chosen ciphertext attack, you have the ability to, chosen message attack, you have the ability to submit to create new fingerprints. This is why we actually control the fingerprinting process through some authorities, which we then decentralize. But the point is that no one can actually generate new fingerprints or submit new queries for chosen messages. So our solution is simply we are not secure against chosen message attack, so instead we defend against the possibility of generating new messages. Does this answer your question?
There is still a probability to break, which is one over the cardinality of the space.
Yes, absolutely. We can also always just guess one random value, and this attack will always work even without submitting any information. But this is linked to the problem. We cannot do better from a security standpoint.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Let's thank speaker again. Okay, so our final privacy talk is going to be by Andrea, who's going to talk about RepSci, or RepSci.
Thanks for the introduction. This is joint work with Emiliano and Christopher at UCL and Claudius Arend at NEC. So yeah, I'm going to talk about process intersection, and so I recall a little bit what process intersection is and some issues that arise in practice by using this primitive, and then I'll talk a little bit about how to model these issues and again some construction to address this. So in process intersection, we have just a two-party protocol where the participant has some input set, and they interact and they try to compute the intersection of their input set. So in the typical application of this primitive, just one of the two parties actually receive the output, so it computes the intersection, while the other party doesn't receive anything. So this is usually referred as the client for the participant getting the output, and server for the one that doesn't receive it. So for the purpose of this talk, I'm just going to focus for semi-honest security, and specifically I'm just going to consider functionality that are deterministic. So process intersection need to satisfy three properties. One is correctness, which just means that if the two participants follow the protocol honestly, at the end of the interaction, the client should get the intersection of the two sets. And then we have client privacy, which just says that the server should not learn any information about the input set of the client. So this is usually formalized using a simulator, which essentially models that anything that the server can compute after interacting with the client essentially would have computed by himself. And most protocols in this case are actually leaking the information, the size of the input set of the client. And but there are some constructions that actually achieve even privacy with respect to the size of the input set of the client. And this is formalized by either passing or not passing this information to the simulator. And similarly, we have server privacy, which is formalized in a similar way. Again, client privacy means that server privacy means that the client should not learn any information about the server set beyond what he can compute from, can be inferred from the output of the functionality, which is in the intersection in this case. So privacy intersection has been suggested to be used in several practical applications. So in one of these is, for example, ride sharing. So in this application, the participants to the protocol are essentially users that are attempting to decide whether to share a journey in order to share the cost of it. And essentially here the input set consists of list of trajectories between points, and the intersection essentially evaluates whether it is convenient for them to share this journey. It has been suggested to be used in genome testing, and so a huge simplification of this, you may just have the doctor that want to just test whether your genome contains a specific sequence, and so you can use process intersection to check this without revealing any other information about your genome. So a last example is about personalized advertisement. So in this case, you can consider an ad network that wants to run some personalized advertisement on some users. So here the input set may consist of a list of interests the user has, for example, and the outcome of the interaction is that essentially the ad network will decide what advert to run to the user. So, taking for example this last settings, essentially there are some issues that may come up in practice when using process intersection. So, for example, the client in this case can just try to exploit the use of this primitive to get more information than what the application would usually require. So one way to do this is, for example, inflating this input set and include like as many elements as you can, and especially in the case where this input set is finite, they may as well include all the elements and learn the entirety of the other input set. And this may not be a problem in general because, as I said, most protocols actually reveal the size of the client set, so the server may even realize that the ad network is actually trying to use an enormous set, so the server may actually realize that. But this is just part of the problem because essentially most of application actually happens through several execution, so the ad network may not even just use an enormous set. You can just keep changing its set frequently up to the point you can actually discover all the other parties' input set. So this is particularly relevant, as I said, in the case whether the interaction occurs through several executions, and especially in the case where the server set actually doesn't change as often. For example, in the case of the genome, where your genome data is fixed once and for all, or even for the case of advertisement, because your interest may actually units may actually change less frequently as you know, the input on the network side. Okay, and actually this is not an attack, even though it's called the Oracle attack. This is not actually an attack because what the client is doing is just simply modifying his input set. And so this is totally allowed. It's not, as I said, it's not an attack. It's called Oracle attack because essentially the client is exploiting to actually get some information about the other party input. Nonetheless, this is still an issue in practice, right? Because if this behavior is allowed from the model, then this is sort of defeat the purpose of using private set intersection in practice, right? Because if the ad network can learn the entire dataset of the other participant, they will do this on the clear, right? So we would like to prevent this behavior, but there's not really anything you can do about it, preventing the adversary to use the input that you want. But at least we would like to provide some sort of mechanism that allows the server to know whether he has leaked too much information to the client or how much information he has leaked. And specifically, we would like to do this across several execution, which essentially means to keep a state across all the execution and decide whether we leaked too much information. So this essentially goes on to essentially formalize private set intersection as a reactive functionality, which essentially just means that, so essentially each execution of the protocol, the outcome of each execution of the protocol may depend on the previous ones. So these are a couple of functionalities that are the ones that we use in the paper, but other are possible. So the model actually can, the security model we have actually captures more generic functionality and specifically can recover non-reactive functionality and specifically the sequential composition of these. So the first one is bounded PSI, which was used by Bradley et al. And is a non-reactive one. And essentially this just says that the client can compute the intersection only if the client set is within a certain prefix bound. And the next one is input control in PSI, which is essentially a stateful variant of this, which essentially says that the client can compute the intersection if and only if essentially the union of all the clients that the client is using all the previous execution is within a certain prefix bound. And so we phrase security in the augmented semi-honest model. So the augmented semi-honest model was introduced by Goldrake, and is a sort of intermediate model which is in the transition between semi-honest model and malicious model. And the main difference is that here the adversary can essentially change the input of the corrupt party. So this helps to essentially capture that dishonest behavior that might happen between one interaction and the other. So we say that a protocol securely relies a reactive functionality if it satisfies again three properties, which are correctness, server privacy, and client privacy. So for correctness, again, it simply means that the output of the party is a true several execution of the protocol, essentially matched with the output of the functionality. And regarding client privacy, so as I said, we would like to give the adversary the capabilities to actually set the input of the corrupt party. And so this is modeled by using an oracle. So through the oracle, the adversary can fix the input of the corrupt party and even its internal state. And this oracle either returns the view of the server in the actual protocol using the input provided by the adversary, or a simulated view for this. And again, we can capture size-hiding property by either giving this information to the simulator or not. Similarly, we can define server privacy. So this is done exactly the same way. So we say that the adversary, the protocol has server privacy if essentially the adversary is not able to distinguish whether he has access to an oracle that is back transcript of the protocol or simulated transcript essentially. So moving now on to the construction, our first building block is about taking the bounded input PSI of Bradley et al. So this is used by linear accumulators, and these are bounded accumulators, which means that the bounded property of PSI comes from the accumulator. Is also securing the random oracle model, and it captures semi-honest behavior. So in the process, we replace the use of the hash function with a smooth projective hash function. So before moving to the protocol, I'll just recall quickly what accumulators are, smooth projective hash function are. So accumulators, this is just a primitive that gets input a set and it provides a compact representation of this set. And on top of this, you can also provide witnesses certifying essentially the membership of element into the accumulated set. So in the specific case of this protocol, they use the bilinear accumulators by Leuven, and this is based on the QSDH assumption. So there are a couple of properties of these accumulators, which are essentially, this provides also a secret key, a sort of a trapdoor that enables to compute witnesses for any elements, not just the one that were accumulated. And it also has another feature, which is essentially the evaluation key it has a fixed length, and essentially it fixed essentially the bound of number of elements that you can actually include in the accumulated set. So on top of this, we extend this also to generate essentially witnesses, certifying that an accumulated set is a subset of another accumulated set. So generally, accumulators can have several properties. So the one we are interested about, aside from correctness, which just says that witnesses for elements that have been accumulated should verify. There's also collision freeness, which essentially says it should be hard to compute a witness for an element that was not included into the accumulated set. And we also rely on the indistinguishability of the accumulators, which just says that the accumulators on its own should not reveal any information about the accumulated set. So briefly on smooth projective hash functions, so these were introduced by Kramer and Shook in the context of NCCA encryption, and these are defined on top of another language, and they also defined by a curve key, a secret key, and a projective key. And these are a sort of designated verifier zero knowledge proof. And what it does essentially, this is a sort of hash function which has two ways to be evaluated. One is using a secret key, which enables to essentially evaluate the hash function over any instance in the language. And the other one is the projective key that enables to evaluate the hash function only in the witness certifying the membership in the language. And these smooth projective hash function has mostly two properties. One is correctness, which just says that the two ways of evaluating the hash function are essentially consistent with each other. And the other is smoothness, which says that if you don't know a witness, it should be hard to distinguish the output of the hash function from a random output. So we can now look at the construction of Bradley et al. So this is the idea is very simple. So the client gets an input set, and essentially just compute an accumulator for this input set and send this accumulator over to the server. Now the server is given the secret key of the accumulator, and you can then extractlessly compute witnesses for all elements included in his input set. After this, what it does is just evaluating computing the hash an hash function on these witnesses, and specifically does so using a random oracle. And then it sends back this list of hashes to the client. And the client, what he can do, so the client doesn't have the secret key of the accumulator, but he computed the accumulator to begin with, so he has the randomness. So what he can do is to compute witnesses for element included in his accumulator, and then compute the hash. So at this point, in order to compute the intersection of the set, the only thing that he has to do is to check for matches between the two lists of hashes and return the elements for which a match has been found in the server list. So this accumulator provides some bounded guarantees because of the boundedness of the accumulator, so it cannot accumulate more than a certain prefix number of elements. It achieves client privacy because the only element that the client is sent into the server is the accumulator. So indistinguishability of the accumulator provides that the information about the privacy of the client set is hidden. And regarding server privacy, we have that, so for the elements that are in the intersection, essentially the client is able to compute a witness, so it should be able to detect them. But for all the other elements that are not included in the intersection, so they are not part of the client set, the collision freeness property of the accumulator says that it should be hard for you to compute witnesses of those. And since we are evaluating everything using a random oracle, the random oracle should hide all the information about the witnesses that are not included in the intersection. So here we just do a simple modification of the protocol. So what we do is essentially replace the use of the random oracle with a smooth projective hash. So the difference is that here the server, what it does, it has the secret key associated with the smooth projective hash, and the language is about membership of elements into the accumulated set. So since the server has the secret key, you can evaluate the element on the hash function on every input S. And then he forwards to the client the projective key essentially and the list of hashes. So at this point, the idea is the same. So the client can compute the witnesses, and since he knows he has now the witnesses and the smooth projective hash, he can the projective key, he can compute the hash on this and evaluate the hash function. So the correctness property of the smooth projective hash guarantees that it should still be able to recover the intersection the same way as it happens in the previous case. And the smoothness property of the smooth projective hash will the smoothness of the projective hash guarantees that for elements that the client is not able to compute a witness, the evaluation of the hash function should be indistinguishable from one. And okay, so we can now pass to the input controlling PSI. So in the first instance of the input controlling PSI, the idea is the same, so to run again a bounded PSI instance, so it is exactly the same. The only difference that now participant keeps a state. And at the end of the interaction, essentially the client state will consist of the inputs that you use in the protocol and the randomness used in the accumulator. While on the server side, the state just consists on the accumulator received from the client. So in the following instance, what happens is that the client again accumulates his input set for this specific instance, but he's also doing a couple of additional things. For example, he's computing the union of whatever input or whatever set he has in the state with his current state, and he's also evaluating this. So on top of this, he's also providing a couple of witnesses, certifying that essentially the set that is accumulating in the current input set is a subset of the set that is accumulating in the union. And it does a similar thing with respect to the accumulator that was used in the previous instance. Now he sends all these elements to the server, and now the server has stored the accumulators with respect to the previous instance. Therefore, he can verify whether these witnesses are actually satisfied, so verified. And in which case he knows that the current accumulator for the current instance and the previous one are a subset of the accumulator stored in the union. So again, the boundedness property guarantees that essentially the union is also within a certain bound because the accumulator can just accumulate up to a certain number of elements. So the rest of the protocol actually unfolds exactly as in the bounded PSI. So again, the server computes the smooth projective hash, and similarly at the end of the execution, the client essentially updates his state with the current union of the current union set that he is using in this instance, while the servers just update his state with the accumulator stored in the union. So regarding server privacy, the element that the server is sending to the client are exactly as before. So it has server privacy for the same reason as the bounded PSI. What changes here is essentially the messages the client sent to the server, and here there are a pair of accumulators which are again the distinguishability property of the accumulators should guarantee that this should not add information. So I didn't specify what these witnesses consist of but essentially these witnesses can be seen as essentially the accumulators to the complement of the set with respect to the union set. And so it turns out that this element can be simulated fairly easily. So the way you do it is essentially you compute an accumulator at random and you pick the witness so that it satisfies the verification operation. But it's easy to simulate this transcript. So also the input controlling PSI should satisfy the client privacy. And with this I conclude. Oh, sorry. So, do you have any questions?
Any questions or comments? No? Okay, let's thank this speaker and all speakers from this session again.